Juniper Books presents The Luckiest Man in the World by Molly Cutpurse, narrated by John Crabtree PhD from his notes recorded at the time. Chapter 11.
19th of March, 2026. The first thing I noticed was that London was being drenched in a powerful rainstorm, which immediately gave rise to the memory of what I had done to my parents, and which caused me to wonder if at some point in the day I should see myself appear and quickly disappear. This thought took on an obsessive nature and led about the time when I knew I had done it yesterday. I sat and waited for me to appear, and yet I did not. There was no displacement of air, no change in temperature or lighting, because in fact nothing happened at all of which left me confused. Well, easily as much as anybody would be, for I had no answer, and to my mathematical and logical mind that was disturbing and caused me to feel even further anxious and troubled. The worrying didn't cease either after I had made coffee and sat and stared at the rain hammering against my windows, the sky a low, monotonous grey as far as I could see, and the rain so heavy that almost all the familiar London landmarks were mostly hidden. I made my first mistake of the day when, not thinking and doing what I always did, I powered up my iPad and saw that it contained just under 27,000 unread messages. And what was worse was that the damn thing began pinging almost continuously, so much that I had no choice but to turn down the sound. But even so, my eyes kept moving to that ever-increasing number next to the app. Of course, I had the option of turning it off, but what would be the point? If I did that, I may as well just throw it off the balcony and be done with it. Therefore, I drank my coffee in peace until my door camera rang, and I spoke to Joyce's face, who didn't look at all pleased as she spoke. "Mr. Crabtree, your post is on its way up to you." At first I didn't know how to respond, and I wanted to say something such as, "So?" But then I remembered yesterday, and it was all I could do to nod gratefully and mutter, "Sorry if this puts you out." But by that time she had disconnected the call. I opened the door and waited for the lift to arrive, which it did all too quickly, whereupon 5 rain-soaked men, each carrying a large yellow sack, trooped to my door, where I unconsciously opened it wider, and one by one they dropped the sacks onto my polished marble floor, each as silent as the one before and one after. "Can you wait there a moment, please? 1 second?" My wallet was in my living room, and I knew I had cash, so I hastily took what notes I had and pressed 5 £20 notes into the hand of a tall, youngish one who was wearing a rather dated style of moustache and gold-rimmed glasses. "For you all, and thanks." The man seemed more than surprised, and he nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir. Much obliged. But we will be back with a second load from what I overheard the sorters saying." I nodded blankly, offering him a grimace before I closed the door. Now the rain seemed to sound even heavier against my windows, and I stood motionless next to the sacks, closed together by their black nylon cable ties. I ran my fingers through what I was sure to be shortly the remains of my hair, feeling nothing, feeling as if my brain was short-circuiting itself. On the one hand, I felt like sitting next to the sacks and hugging them. I had no idea why. While on the other hand, taking each one and treating them as if I wanted to treat my iPad earlier. I knew the crowd was still down there, a combination of hearing them as a gentle and prolonged series of cries, and the fact that if they had dissipated mainly because of the weather, then someone would have certainly mentioned it. Somehow, I forced myself to do normal things, such as showering and shaving, and only after I did I begin to feel a little more human, or at least less of a freak. Over another coffee, I wrote my notes from yesterday, deliberately avoiding the media in all its forms. Talk about burying your head in the sand. Was that the right thing to do? But who exactly was on my side? Who was in agreement with me? Who could I talk to without them judging me? This introspecting led me immediately to Maximilian and his tempting offer. Yes, that is what I wrote, because although I could not see them from where I was sitting, I knew that there was perhaps thousands of letters in my main lobby, some mostly pleading for help and some abusive ones, all wanting my attention. And no doubt Maximilian would have some sort of plan to deal with all of them, giving me details of only those who could offer a huge payment. Wouldn't that be just great to take all that pressure off me, to perhaps help just a dozen people a year, to return to a gratefully and carefully structured life of studying with no worries of a financial nature? Just perhaps once a day, utilising this gift, if that's what it was, leaving me free to do whatever I liked. But because the retraction had been sent, would that make any difference to partnering with Maximilian? No, probably not. And the truth was, I didn't even have to tell Jennifer or my parents and sisters. I would be able to remain the man to whom a great injustice by a printed publication had been exposed and successfully negotiated and consequently won. And then I would simply disappear quietly from the nation's conscience. These theories of thoughts, images and sensations felt pretty good to me as I lazily sipped my coffee, and as if to compound my decision, I even turned up the sound of my iPad and phone a little to hear so many beeps that they were occurring with such frequency that they almost sounded like a low-frequency binaural beat. I hadn't the interest to actually see how many emails and messages I was receiving. They were probably by now so many that they were just all meaningless, as purposeless as those sacks which were now beyond my vision. I did, though, take a peek at the road, and I was shocked to see it was still blocked, with hundreds more demonstrators, sounding like a baying crowd, unremitting in the pouring rain. For all I could see was a sea of umbrellas and the police in their high visibility vests. The chaotic scene pushed me to turn off the apps on my devices, and I called Jennifer. I was surprised when a man answered. "Oh, hello. Sorry, have I got the wrong number? Is Jennifer there?" "She's not able to get to the phone at the moment. Can I take a message? I'm her husband." Please, my name is John Crabtree, and could you ask her if she can call me? It's rather urgent." "Yes, I can do that, Mr. Crabtree." "So you are he, then?" Well, yes, we've been working together." "And you are the chap who is responsible for her getting beaten up by prostitutes in 1946? It was the way he said it. When it was spoken to me like that, so plainly and factual over the phone, it just seemed more than ludicrous. But sensibly, I remembered to whom I was talking, and I didn't laugh. "Yes, that was unfortunate, but we have a better relationship now." "So she tells me. So do you intend to send her anywhere else?" "No, of course not. In fact, we have a program set in place for it all to stop." "And you think that will work?" "She mentioned the retraction to you." "She did, and I laughed." "Laughed? Why?" "If I have to tell you, there's no point. I'll pass your message along." And there Mr. Martin abruptly ended the call, leaving me hanging and doubting all the positive thoughts I had had just recently. So what could a fellow do when the world appeared to confront him in such numbers? Why, return to my bed, of course. but this time taking my phone with the message app turned off. And to my surprise, I slept as well, as my side clock informed me. But it took a short while to realise that I had been awakened by a familiar sound of my door camera. It was Jennifer, and I gladly let her in and boiled water for coffee. She joined me in my kitchen, and her shoulders and the arms of her coat were soaked. No umbrella today? Have you seen it out there? And I don't mean the weather. I saw them earlier. It seems as if there are more of them than yesterday. It's madness. They are now stretching right up the next road, and now there are even stalls selling food and drink, which is not going down well with the police. People are being arrested. It's crazy. Have you heard from Morton? Yes, I got your message as well. I apologise if my husband gave you a hard time. When I went home that evening after my trip to 1946, my face was pretty badly beat up, and it was only because I wouldn't tell him who had caused it. Not at first, at least. That was the reason that you never met him. He was a bit sharp, but I deserved it. So what did Morton say? He's going to write a retraction, and it will be in tomorrow's edition. It can't be too early to get rid of them out there. What's going on in your hallway? Santa arrived early? I gave her a withering look. Okay, that's a solid burn. Too early, just trying to lighten the mood because you look like a dog that's been hung. When did they arrive? Earlier. I felt so guilty I gave the postman a 20 each. £20? How many were there? 5. 5? Each? That's more than I give my bin men at Christmas. We wandered over to my favourite window, and she saw that I'd opened a few letters. So you started on them, then? What are they saying? Read some yourself. They haven't done me any favours for my overall mental health. I gave her a swift rundown of my poor night's sleep, and she began opening some. Ooh, here's a strange one. Rather more in your professional line, I think, rather than just living old emotional ties. Read it? Well, blah, 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 blah. Okay. We have here a professor of Egyptian antiquities. Oh, actually living in Cairo. And she wants to be taken back so she can take a photo of Queen... Can't read it. Oh, yeah. Queen Cleopatra. There you are. Not asking much, is it? I could tell her by her surprising upbeat tone she was being ironic. It was obvious to me she had either had a decent night's sleep or she had had sex that morning. These people, who do they think they are? They must live in a dream world. What does he think she... Oh well, what does she think we are going to do? Just turn up and get an audience with the Queen, just like that? It's as mad as expecting somebody from the 44th century to come back to this time and expect to get close to the King for a selfie. Rulers are always heavily protected. Next. Jennifer was about to read another one when my door camera rang once again, and I sighed, blowing out my cheeks in an exaggerated fashion. We looked at each other before I rose to answer it. But by the time I had walked to the door, it had shut itself off. I considered ringing the front desk, but then my front door bell rang, and I opened it to see more postmen carrying more identical yellow sacks, and what was more, Maximilian stood behind them, wearing a peculiar expression that could be mistaken for a smile. All right, Mr. Crabtree, to come in? I recognised the man who spoke as one of those from this morning, and I nodded. Throw them with the others, please. Is there going to be any more? Not today, sir. Oh, you haven't opened the last ones? My manager asked me to bring back the sacks. I stared at him for perhaps a few seconds, not fully realising how fully important his manager's orders were. Well, yeah, take them. Just give me a hand, will you? Make a pile over in that corner. How many more have you got now? Another 9. 9? Okay, but take the lot back. Just help me end up them, will you? The oddly moustached man and 3 others set to work, and all too quickly I was the owner of a pile of letters that came up to my waist, and which completely obscured one corner of my primary lobby. No more cash changed hands, only because I didn't offer any, and after I had closed the door, only Maximilian stood there, leaning on his unnecessary cane, his gloved fingers stretched around the elegantly sculptured elephant's head. He still wore that smile, which I found entirely discomposing. "What are you so happy about?" "More post, I see. And what do you intend to do with all those? Read them?" "I don't know yet. We're in here." He followed me to where Jennifer was sitting at the table, and I sat, not offering him a seat, so he just stood. "Quite industrious here. I wonder how long it's going to take the 2 of you to open everything. Or perhaps, John, you'll come to your senses and begin to choose what's best for all involved. I ought to tell you, Maximilian, that I've written a retraction and Morton is going to publish. He already has got it. And what was the phrase you used earlier, Jennifer? Oh, yes. It's being put to bed." "I see. Didn't you pay any attention at all to what I advised yesterday? The ball is in my court, and I've yet to serve. If he goes ahead and makes a retraction, how will he look when my evidence goes live? Pretty stupid, don't you think? No, keep sitting, John. No need to stand, and certainly no need to stand anywhere near me. I'm not stupid. I've no intention of allowing myself to be taken anywhere else, so put that right out of your mind." I bit my lip, unable to think any further, and annoyed that he had predicted what I was thinking, and even Jennifer looked as if she was doomed to everlasting misery. "So I see you have probably not thought about my proposal enough. Well, I am a generous man, but this time I will give you an ultimatum. By this time tomorrow, you'll either agree or I'll burn that newspaper into bankruptcy. I'll see myself out." Again, we remained quiet after he had left, with me possessing the growing feeling that I was nothing more than a rat in a laboratory cage. Only Jennifer continued to open envelopes until I asked her to stop. "I told you he was clever." "What now?" "I'll phone Morton if you like, but I know it'll be too late to stop the presses." "Do you know Caroline's routine?" "Not really, but as she tweets about every half an hour, I suppose it wouldn't be hard to figure out something. What's on your mind?" "So he's got me by the short hairs, but what if I threatened his sister with another little trip?" "No, not threatened, but actually did it." "If you can find her." "Ah, but if I can't, then I won't have to, will I? Because I met her twice before in London, didn't I? Once when I was there, once when I went back. I'm guessing it would be easy to take her." "Okay, but how are you going to leave this flat? Even when the retraction has been read, there's still going to be people who want to believe. You have to get into the mind of these people, John, and he's only giving you a day. Then I'll leave by the same way I arrived." Suddenly Jennifer's neck twisted around. "What's that noise?" I heard it too. It sounded like a huge angry swarm of wasps, and it didn't take me long before I saw a drone hovering perhaps 2 meters away from my window, sunlight catching the lens on its onboard camera slung beneath it. My immediate reaction, muscle memory, was to close the curtains or pull down the blinds. But a microsecond later, I realised I had installed neither over that wide window because I was not overlooked. Shit! All I could immediately think of was covering my face with an envelope, and I ran into my kitchen, the only room that was windowless. Bastards! They aren't allowed to do that, are they? I don't think they are, John, but honestly, I'm not up with the nuances of the law on this. But they are invading my privacy. If I can't get... My anger was cut short by Jennifer's mobile ringing, and she looked at it. Well, well, well. Speak of the devil, it's Caroline. Her call was punctuated by long periods of silence. Yes. What about him? When? How? I'm with him at the moment. We can't exactly get to the TV right now. Okay. Why are you telling me this? Okay. All right. Jennifer touched the screen, ending the call, and stared at me gravely. What does she want? Bad news, John. Apparently it's all over the news. That child you brought here, he was discovered dead early this morning. I had no words. I was stunned. Apparently all the police know at the moment is that he managed to slip out of his room and leave the building, and the guards watching the CCTV didn't see him. He was found by a nurse in one of the bike huts. She was arriving for an early shift. He'd hung himself. I'm sorry. Hung himself? But he was only about 9 years old. What kid that age thinks of hanging himself? He must have been very unhappy. Or scared shitless, more likely. Jesus. I can't imagine what he must have gone through. What are you doing? Seeing if there's any news about him. Oh, she wasn't lying. God, the stories everywhere. John, are you listening to me? I have to save him. I'll go back and take him to where he can get treatment in his own time. John, maybe that's not such a good idea. Why not? I'll have to do something. But maybe not that. Think it through. Even if you find him, before you find him, as it were, what are you actually going to do? Walk through the streets carrying him until you find a hospital or something? You don't have any clothes of the period, no money, nothing. And what if a policeman finds you first? He'll want details, who you are, what the boy's name is, and do we know his name? Caroline mentioned his first, but apparently didn't know his surname. He was called Jimmy. John, please think about this for a moment. I can't think straight with that thing buzzing at my window. Help me cover them with a couple of sheets. Therefore, at least the buzzing stopped after we had hung 2 double sheets. After we sat with 2 new mugs of coffee in a slightly shadowed living room, while my feelings of being trapped intensified, except that now I had the death of the lad on my conscience, and it seemed as if every time I closed my eyes for more than a blink, I saw him as I found him, weak, malnourished, and close to death. I don't understand how he managed to leave the hospital without anybody noticing. Maybe it's not so hard to understand, John. He was a Victorian beggar, more than likely existing using his wits. Who knows what skills he may have had living on the streets. But that makes things worse. If he had the cunning to survive, then what could have happened to have driven him to take his own life? It doesn't make sense. John, how can you not see this? What year did you take him from? 1878. I could see she was waiting for the penny to drop, but I remained mute. 1878, and you go and dump him in a modern hospital, a building so far removed from any place he might have known. He must have been terrified once he became aware of his surroundings. John, are you listening to me? But the truth was, I wasn't at the time. I was feeling overwhelmed with more raw emotions than I had previously experienced. More than ever, I wanted a G&T, but even I knew that to go down that route at that time of the day would be wrong decision. I brought my hand, the one with the markings, close to my face, but staring intently at them didn't ease my feelings at all. John, you can't think about changing history, but I've already done it, haven't I? It's not your fault. I'm sure the hospital did as much for him as they could. Oh, I believe that. I mean, he was bloody unconscious, so for him to scarper in the middle of the night unseen, they must have fixed him up to some degree. I'm guessing that he couldn't just handle the change. He must have been terrified. Who the hell's that now? It was my door camera again. When I pressed the button, I saw 4 people who were unknown to me, for the good reason that they were policemen. Hello, yes? Good morning. City of London Police. We'd like to speak with Mr. John Crabtree. Oh, yes. Come up. I stood back from the button and Jennifer joined me. The police. What can they want with you again? The answer came shortly after I let 4 men in and we stood in my primary lobby. While the 2 uniformed police said nothing, the older of the 2 plainclothes one introduced himself. Mr. Crabtree, I'm Chief Inspector Tuffin, and this is Sergeant Harris. Do you know why we are here? About the boy. Word has reached you then. My friend here, Miss Martin, took a call just a few minutes ago, in fact. Is it true that the child died in suspicious circumstances? Yes, that is indeed the case. You are aware that your lot ruled out anything suspicious to do with me, don't you? I was inconvenienced for over 2 weeks, and all I did was my civic duty. We are aware, Mr. Crabtree, of your involvement as much as we know who this lady is and of her connection to the Nibley-Dawson family. Okay? Because it feels to me more than a coincidence that this discovery of the child by you has a connection to the family who had an intention to house the boy privately when he was fit enough to be discharged. Can I assume that you are somehow connected to that family? I met Caroline Nibley-Dawson twice, and yes, I know Maximilian, her brother. Yes, we know he has been seen entering this building. Then why did you ask them? Is that the only reason you're here, mob-handed? Not especially. Why is the road blocked off? Nothing to do with me. That's the police's doing. But why? Oh, come on. You know why. I know a rather unusual article has been published indicating that a certain person has a claim on some rather fantastic abilities. Then you'll be aware that every Tom, Dick and Harry who believes in conspiracy theories has put away their PlayStations and taken to the streets. Not something I can control. In fact, I've issued a press release that will be published soon, and then hopefully those idiots will go back to living peacefully in their mother's basement. What sort of a press release? Damning the theoretical mathematical idea I had, which consists exactly of what? Chief Inspector, I've no wish to disrespect you, but I am a doctor of mathematics, a senior wrangler, and unless you have the education I have, speaking about it will be a waste of your time and mine. But the essence, so I understand, was about travelling through time, like Doctor Who. The middle-aged man struggled with a certain amount of difficulty, preventing himself from smirking, which annoyed me. No, not like bloody Doctor Who. In theory, yes, but it was simply an idea that has no basis in reality. And your press release makes that clear, as crystal. So all those straining at the barriers out there are misinformed then. Of course they are, because travelling through time is not possible. Every physicist in the world will tell you that. I see. Because what troubles me, Mr. Crabtree, is the connection between that and a Dr. Liard who treated the child and who told me that it was the worst case of malnutrition and neglect he had seen since arriving in this country. In fact, he told me that it was the worst case he had ever seen in his entire life and career. Okay, but the police have established that I had nothing to do with his condition. I only did the right thing by taking him to hospital, something which I'm now regretting doing. And you found the boy where? I've been through this. Victoria Embankment Gardens. And you were just happening to walk by. That's about it. I see. Excuse me for one moment, Chief Inspector. My friend now has drones hovering outside his windows. Surely that's against the law. Possibly, madam. If it can be proved the operator is breaking data protection laws, then I suggest you contact the Civil Aviation Authority. That's it? We've had to put sheets up over the windows. Sir, any photos or videos that an operator takes may be covered by the General Data Protection Regulation, said the sergeant. Ah, there you are. Thank you, Sergeant. He levelled his gaze at Jennifer. And your name is Jennifer Martin. And your address? Why do you want my address? And you said you know who I am. Just procedure. Well, I'm not giving it to you. I don't have to. Very well. And what is your relationship with Mr. Crabtree? A friend. A friend. Did you get that, Sergeant? I did, sir. Very good. Well, I think I have all the information I need at the moment. I'm sure more things will come to light on my next visit. He nodded, and one of the uniformed men opened my front door, leaving me furious. So furious that I kicked the door closed so violently that I'm sure my 4 departing visitors must have heard it. Returning to the living room, we sank onto the sofa, but then I snapped. Damn it, I'm gonna have a drink. You want one? Not for me, John, and you ought to keep a clear head if you don't mind me saying. Just one. I bloody deserve it. I can't believe a boy that young actually hung himself. It does make me wonder what sort of things he witnessed during his short life. It's terrible. But all the same, John, I think you'd be mad to try and alter things. You remember that film with Mickey Mouse, Fantasia? And how whatever he did, things just got worse? I get the feeling that applies here. And I ask you to really think about it before you do anything mad. So I'm supposed to just sit here on my arse like some king high in his castle, waiting for the rabble to burst down my door? Very poetical, John. But yes, at least wait and see what the response is to your press release. So wait until tomorrow. I think that's best. You know, you haven't even told me where you live. And deliberately so, John, because I'm very protective of my family, considering what I do for a living. I nodded and took a long sip of my G&T. You know, Caroline is not the only person I could use against Maximilian if things took an ugly turn. Oh, yes? Yes. What about his mother? What about her? Surely she's dead, isn't she, by now? Even if she is, she need not be. Oh, God Almighty, please don't think about that. Why not? He's threatening me. Why should I not threaten him? He thinks he's got all the cards, but he hasn't got the ability I've got. Unable to persuade me to change my mind, Jennifer left soon after and battled her way through the cordon, texting me once again when she had reached her car. She indicated that she thought the mob was more restless than the day before, which didn't help my mood. Not having much to do at all and finding it impossible to do any meaningful work, I wasted the rest of the day watching films and drinking wine. Only after the sun set did I hear the baying of the mob below. My not-so-restful day was interrupted twice more by neighbours knocking at my door and complaining, and they further added to my continuing misery as I tried to think of a single solution that would solve everything. But at the time, the one thing that did tragically and finally work, of a sort, wasn't even currently a speck of light bright enough to throw a shadow on my black horizon. That solution would take its own time to work its way into my consciousness. It hardly needs to be said that once again, The quality of my sleep that night was poor, and at some mad hour I awoke for the fourth or fifth time after her horrendous dream about Jimmy, one in which he was larger than me and shouting, yet I couldn't hear what he was saying. Funny old thing, the brain.
You have been listening to an audio production of The Luckiest Man in the World by Molly Cutpurse, narrated by John Crabtree PhD.